Welcome to Talk Dizzy to Me, the show that brings you a comprehensive look into the complex field of dizziness. Now here are your hosts, vestibular physical therapist Dr. Abbie Ross and Dr. Danielle Tolman.
Hello and welcome back to Talk Dizzy to Me. My name is Dr. Danielle Tolman. I am a vestibular physical therapist and as always joined by Abbie Ross, who is also a vestibular therapist and neuroclinical specialist. And today we are very, very excited to have on Dr. Dara Meldrum to talk about creating and validating technology for vestibular patients. She has created the Vertigenius and we're so excited to talk about this technology today because it's something that's upcoming and really, really cool. So Dr. Meldrum, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Would you mind giving our listeners a little bit of your background and introduce yourself?
Sure. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. Delighted to be here this evening. It's a dark evening here in Dublin. And I've been following your podcast, so just really looking forward to doing this session with you this evening. Yes, so I am a physical therapist, or physiotherapist as we call it over in Europe. Trained in Trinity College Dublin, started working in Ireland and then went to Canada, where I got really interested in neurosurgery, came back and worked in the neurosurgical centre in Dublin, got very interested in dizziness and imbalance there, went off and did a master's in London and then came back and went into teaching, stayed clinical all along, but went into teaching and lecturing and research pretty soon after that. And when I was working in Beaumont Hospital, a referral landed on my desk that was said BPPV, please assess and treat. And like the rest of us didn't know what it was. This was back in the early 1990s. And just started to be trained in the area and started to really just see the benefits that we had for these patients and how they got better and how limited access there was for it. So wanted to do a PhD in the area, and then so I went on and did my PhD in the area. And after the PhD, decided that I thought that there was a gap where we could actually develop a technology for patients, for every patient that has dizziness and imbalance and vertigo, that they could use it no matter what, and to have it to make the treatment more accessible for therapists.
Accessibility is really an important thing.
Yes, absolutely. And I work clinically in the Balance Centre in Ranelagh, so we just see dizziness and balance patients there. We've been using Vertigenius in the clinic for the last couple of years, and yeah, we're just starting now to roll it out across Europe and hopefully the United States as well.
We're definitely excited to talk about that. But before we jump into everything, I think that covering some definitions about what we're going to talk about and the differences between these different things would be really helpful for our listeners. Would you mind kind of going through some of these with us?
Yeah, so I think, technology is kind of exploding really, isn't it? And, particularly within the area of physical therapy. And I think there's just so much opportunities for us to harness it, and we have to be judicious about it. We have to make sure that we've got evidence for it. And I always love starting with definitions and on what I'm dealing with before I start, throwing these things at patients. So digital health's kind of the buzzword at the moment, and that's really kind of the use of digital, mobile and wireless technologies, to support the delivery of health and to get better health. And it's kind of an umbrella term for things like e-health and m-health. And e-health is the use of information and communication technologies for health. And then m-health is sort of wireless technologies where they're mobile and they can, you can use them out wherever you are, not be tethered to a building. And then tele-rehabilitation is the delivery of rehabilitation services using information and communication technologies. Okay, and that can be synchronous, where you're doing it in real time, like with a tele-rehab consult, or it's asynchronous, where the patient may upload some data, or you may be viewing what they're doing and evaluating them there. And that's been used a little bit in diagnosis for vertigo, acute vertigo in the ED departments, where maybe the assessments are uploaded and then a neurologist will look and see what they think the diagnosis might be. So I think in therapy, we're using a little bit of both of those, synchronous and asynchronous tele-rehabilitation. And then within those, there's kind of different types of technologies. So we're all familiar now with virtual reality, and that's really where we use the 3D simulation of an environment. So you feel like you're in this environment, but it's actually it's a simulated environment. And the more immersive that is, the more effective it seems to be. But it can also make you feel very sick when you're in it. And then there's augmented technology, which is where it's kind of a mixture, where the real world is superimposed on the virtual world, or vice versa. So you might be walking on a treadmill, you might see a butterfly coming at you to do your VOR exercise. And then the area that we're involved in with Vertigenius is sensors. So sensors is basically, they react to what's happening in the environment. So the sensor that we've developed tracks the head. And as we know, the head and how the head moves is extraordinarily important and abnormal in patients with vestibular problems. But you could have things like EMG or force plates. They're all sensors. They pick up what's happening in the physical environment. And then finally, I think importantly for us, when we're contemplating what technologies we're going to use, is whether or not what we're doing, what we're using is considered a medical device. Because if it's considered a medical device, it has to go through a very stringent regulatory pathway. And also it may not be reimbursable unless it's a medical device. So a medical device is really anything that diagnoses, prevents, or monitors treatment. Okay, and it can be anything from an instrument, an apparatus, or a machine, or an implant. So in the case again of virtual reality, it might be that you're putting on a headset because you're monitoring and treating the patient. With ours, we have a head sensor. Again, it's considered a medical device because it's treating a medical condition, which is vertigo, dizziness, and imbalance. So they're they're kind of all the things you kind of need to think about before you start applying technology to your patients, and where things are going to fit into your clinical care pathway.
Yeah, I remember back in 2018 when we were starting Balancing Act, the term telehealth really, I think the APTA, American Physical Therapy Association, had like 1 or 2 sentences in their statement online about it. And it's just wild to see how much that term and then other terms within the realm of telehealth have exploded. Did you, prior to getting into more of the technology piece of it, were you treating patients via telehealth, or do you still now?
Prior to COVID, no, I was not treating patients with telehealth. And actually, when we were starting to look at developing Vertigenius, which is over 8 or 9 years ago now, and I remember talking to therapists, and they said, if the patient's not in front of you, it's not considered care, and they will not reimburse it. And then COVID hit. So actually, we did a survey back in 2019, pre-COVID, with about 470 therapists and doctors that were treating across Europe, and only less than 5% of them reported using telehealth. And then if you roll on forwards to sort of 2022, and a group in Pittsburgh did a survey and found that 38% of vestibular therapists were reporting using telehealth for vestibular neuritis. So it literally had exploded, and now it's being reimbursed. So yeah, the landscape has really changed. But also we'll get into this a little bit further. The evidence seems to support that it's safe and effective. So there are pros and cons. So I'm sure we will be talking about all of those.
Was there anything that particularly got you interested in the technology and telehealth to improve clinical care for those with dizziness and balance issues? Like, what drove you besides this, pandemic that kind of brought it to light for everybody?
Yeah, so it was prior to the pandemic, and I think I was always, measurement and understanding the effect of what we were doing as physical therapists was really always of interest to me. And I used to be envious of the doctors and the research studies that could, draw down a vial of a medication and then, inject it to the patient, and then measure what happened in the blood and measure what the patient. And we gave patients exercises, sent them home, and there's just this big black hole, and we didn't know what was doing, what was happening. They could tell us, but we really, we weren't really sure what exactly was going on when they went home. And a lot of, as we know, vestibular rehabilitation happens at home and has to happen very frequently. So the Nintendo Wii Fit Plus came out, and it had a force plate, it had games, it had all these amazing things that I thought, my goodness, this is technology that we could apply in vestibular rehabilitation. So I applied for a grant, and that's what I did my PhD in. So for those of you that can see this on YouTube, we went through all the games on the Nintendo Wii Fit Plus, and we pulled out the ones that we thought would, stimulate balance, help retrain gait in certain ways, and also do a little bit of gait stability. So some of them had head movements. There was a football game where you moved your head from side to side. So got some grant funding and did a randomized control trial where we just randomized patients to either using the Nintendo Wii Fit Plus or using the balance board and a balance mat and a ball. And they both got the same intensity, but it was just delivered via different means. And what was really interesting was you could bring back the Nintendo Wii Fit Plus, and you could plug it in, and you could see exactly what the patient had done, when they had done it, how long they'd been on it. And that just gave us so much information. We didn't find that it was superior except in the enjoyment, and the patients said they were less fatigued actually as well. So they were much more enjoyed using the technology, and they felt much less fatigued, interestingly, when they used the technology compared to when they did our conventional exercises. But the outcomes were fairly similar. So, and the way wasn't really fit for purpose. It didn't do gaze stabilization exercises. It didn't have front end flexibility, which is where you can change and you can tweak stuff. They just did the exercise and that was it. So you can see if they improved and stuff on it, but you couldn't actually, as we know, is really important in vestibular rehab to progress patients and individualize it in a very systematic and titrated way. So you couldn't do that in the way. It also said, funny things to patients, and you kind of go, oh, that's not really very medical. So, so then I came up with that idea. Well, maybe we should try and develop the technology ourselves and see if we could actually build one that's fit for purpose. And the thoughts around why you digitize, well, like, why would you digitize it? And I thought, well, look, we know so few patients get access to this very effective treatment. So if we digitize it and we make it more broadly available, there's physios siloed in, different places around the world. There's this broad platform that everybody can access. Doctors can even access. They can start patients sooner. It might save us time. So we spend an awful lot of time taking history, doing questionnaires, printing out exercises, changing exercise sheets. We don't know what patients are doing at home. We can't measure adherence. So therefore, if we can't measure adherence, we can't assess dosage very well. And so I kind of thought, if we can actually see what we're prescribing, see if they're doing it, then we'll take the guesswork out of our fit principles, our frequency, intensity, or type, and our time. So we don't know whether we're under or overdosing patients at the moment with exercise. And, having used Vertigenius over the last few years, it is really interesting to see that the way, patients who do their exercises get better faster, patients who are not doing them aren't getting better. But sometimes we don't need the dosage that we think we need, that they might be doing half what we tell them to do, but they're still getting better. So all those questions still to be answered. I thought we can answer these with technology. So that was really kind of the motivation to start building the technology that was fit for purpose for patients.
It seems like it really does address a lot of the issues that we have as clinicians working with patients, but also addressing issues that patients have in terms of having access to that care, having somebody keep them accountable, right? They're probably more likely to do their exercises if they're wearing this technology that they have to hand in their homework at the end of the week, or somebody can check in on what they're doing. So it definitely seems like it addresses a lot of things that I think that we struggle with in the clinic without technology. I know, is there problems that technology can also solve for the patients, or do the patients have problems with that tech?
Yeah, so if we at the start, when we were thinking about building Vertigenius, we sat down with our patients in the waiting room actually, and we said, okay, well, what kind of problems are you having with exercises? And some of them said, look, they're easy, they're fine, and they're boring, right? Okay, but a lot of them they can be easy, but they said a lot of them can be a bit boring. But the main thing that they said, which I think will resonate with every vestibular therapist, is that they made them feel unwell. And that sort of gave this kind of fear avoidance and avoidance of these symptoms. And if it's not explained or measured, they just don't do them. And then you waste a week because they come back and go, I just felt so unwell, so I just didn't do them. Whereas if you could see that remotely, you could adjust the prescription fairly quickly. So we also said they also didn't know how far to move their head, how fast to move their head, they didn't feel motivated, they wanted reminders. And so they had problems that we thought could be addressed and they did think that a sensor would help with that, and being monitored would help with it. And I think it was this year, a paper by Calderon really replicated. We only had 31 patients in this, but they've just replicated with some focus groups. And again, the real theme that came out was, I really felt unwell when I was doing the exercises, but all this thing around feedback, not knowing whether I'm doing it right. And also actually some of them saying, when I'm getting better, then I kind of feel like I don't need to do them because they work. We know the exercises work. So they kind of go, when they're working, I don't need to do them anymore. So if we could see that as a therapist, you're getting better and you're not doing your exercises, okay, well, maybe you don't need to do as many anymore. Maybe we now need to move on to a different phase in your rehab. So yeah, so we were kind of convinced that, that if we came up with a technology that patients would be interested in it. And we also then obviously had to talk to the great therapists. So we had to say, well, look, what are vestibular therapists? What problems are they having? So I did some interviews around the world with therapists around the world. colleagues that I'd worked with over the years and just said, look, what problems are you having with delivering vestibular rehab? And they were just like, the thing that was coming back all the time was, we just don't know what's happening in the house. And if we knew what was happening, it would give us a piece of information that would help us to progress patients, okay? That patients do exercises wrong, we can't correct it because we don't see, we have to make changes to the program without really having the full picture. And again, so somebody said to me, if we knew what they were doing at home, we would learn from it. So that was, again, I thought, okay, right, well, there, I think we can maybe build something that can answer all these problems and build it so that every patient can access it. Not massively high expensive technology, which is great and it's fantastic to have in the clinic, but it's hard to translate that obviously into the home. It's just too expensive for every patient to get access to it.
I love the part about the dosage of exercise, because that's always a question that patients have. Well, how many times do you want me to do this? And, we know that repetition is key in progressing patients and getting them to feel better faster. But I like that maybe you start at this specific dosage, and then as their symptoms decline, you pull back on that dosage and you say, live your life, because life is one big vestibular exercise. I really like that you can see that in real time versus waiting for that follow-up. I think it depends on the type of practice setting you're in as a therapist. The way that we operate is we have pretty open communication with our patients throughout their course of care. I usually encourage them to email me or call me when you feel like you're ready for a progression, or if you have any questions or something's not going so well, and we'll get you in, versus more traditional physical therapy that says, I'll see you one time a week for 8 weeks or whatever it is. But I like this real time. I can check out, did they do their homework? How are their symptoms? Can we see a trend? And then make the adjustments. That's so cool.
Yeah, I think it just helps. And also, I do see that in the future, we're not with AI yet, we're not with machine learning yet, because we don't have the data sets for it. But if you can imagine all the data sets from all clinics coming in on exercises, on how patients are doing them, how their symptoms are changing, we're then rapidly going to get to a situation where we can train models to suggest, and not to replace us, but to suggest that in this scenario, this exercise has shown to be the best one to go to next. Or in this scenario, we expect this patient's symptoms will reduce, 25% by 6 weeks. We're a few years off that, if not many years off it. But the ability now to collect electronic data is going to let us solve those problems, automate a bit more, and then everybody's going to go, oh my God, are we going to be out of a job? But we're not, because if it's automated and if the bits that can be done intelligently with our input are done, then it frees up our time to see more patients and to get, because we know there's just too many patients out there to be treated for the numbers of therapists that are out there. So we'll free up our times to actually see more patients if some of this gets automated.
And have you looked at how physical therapists, physiotherapists are embracing the use of technology or telehealth now that this has become something that's more accessible and familiar?
Yeah, so other groups are looking at this, I think, and as I mentioned before, pre-COVID it was really low, but since COVID it is going up. Now some people are saying that it's dropping off again, that patients are preferring to come in, but I think the guidelines that are coming out are suggesting that maybe the hybrid approach is probably maybe the best approach. So I had a patient in today who had come a long way for assessment. I was able to do all the diagnostic testing, VHIT, all that sort of stuff with her there in person, and then was able to say to her, now from now on, if you wish, we can do this by telehealth. So you don't have to get in the car, feel sick, all that sort of stuff when you're coming up, that you can, focus your time on exercises. As long as you're in front of me and I can see you, I don't need to put my hands on you again for another while. Neck was fine, that sort of stuff. So I think the hybrid approach probably is the most attractive, and maybe, we don't have great evidence yet, but it's probably the one that we're, as vestibular therapists, I think we're happiest with at the moment. But having said that, we drew up guidelines in COVID for if everything had to be done completely, because, patients weren't let in at all to the clinic. If everything had to be done completely by telehealth in terms of the assessment, there was a lot you could do with a camera. You couldn't do a clinical head impulse test or the VHIT, but you could do an awful lot else. You could look at saccades, you could look at smooth pursuit, and so we set up it was through Activivorous, is the UK actually group, and they set up a really nice, we published a really nice set of guidelines of what you should do if you're going to do a telehealth in terms of safety for the patient, check and stuff. Very simple steps like, am I talking to the right patient? Is there somebody here if we run into a problem? What's their phone number in case I can't contact you? All that sort of stuff first, and then go into your telehealth assessment. And then, with a platform such as Vertigenius, then you can then start to deliver the care there as well. So the first study we did with Vertigenius was we used the software only. We didn't use the head sensor because it was during COVID, and the therapist, recruited the patients, and they had the telehealth platform where they were doing the assessment with the patient and the treatment of the patient, and they had Vertigenius open. They were able to treat the patient completely remotely. When patients they weren't let in for a start to the hospital, but they didn't want to come in either. When things started to settle down, they really didn't want to come in because they just didn't want to be exposed to the virus. So it did change everybody's perception of telehealth. And we started to look at this, and safety is obviously do no harm. It has to be safe, but it seemed to be a safe way to deliver care.
And in terms of, maybe not there quite yet, but with AI becoming more and more prevalent in healthcare as well, have you received any pushback or negative feedback from therapists wanting to avoid that route?
No, because I think we're such a long way away from it, regulations wise as well. So I think unless there's a person put into the middle of these machine learning algorithms, regulators really aren't happy about it yet. So it's very nascent. I think we've a long way to go. I think, even ChatGPT is becoming, people are starting to use that a lot more. It is changing. It has, AI has changed the world already, I would say. So it is coming to our profession. And I think we just need to, again, just be very judicious about it. And it is, at the end of the day, machine learning is about statistics, taking big data sets and inferring from it what's going to happen and predicting what's going to happen. But I think we'll always need to have the human factor in there, because it's not going to read body language. It's not going to, do the sort of intuitive stuff it's not going to do that, but it's going to help us, I think. And yeah, so as with all things, there will be early adopters. There will be people who are very resistant to it. And if it then becomes the way of treatment from the insurers, whatever, then we'll start to use it. But it'll be like anything.
Hey guys, it's Abbie here. Unclench your jaw, relax your shoulders, take a nice deep breath. Doesn't that feel better? Thank you so much for listening to Talk Dizzy to Me. One of our missions here at Balancing Act Rehab is to spread awareness about vestibular dysfunction, and the best way to do that is with your help. We'd be so grateful if you took a moment to subscribe, review, and share our show with someone you think would benefit from hearing our conversations. Let's get back to it.
So what are some of those questions that we need to ask when it comes to adopting technology?
Yeah, so I think the first thing you want to ask is whether or not does it work? I mean, as therapists, we just want to know, is it going to deliver better outcomes? Okay. Now, it may not be that we know vestibular rehabilitation works, right? So, and that's what I found, whether you did it conventionally or whether you did it with the technology, we got really good outcomes, but there was some added benefits to that. So, payers want to know you're going to get better outcomes, but if it delivers better outcomes, and I think of it in a way that if you have people who are following guidelines better because they've got technology prompting them to do that. So our more junior therapists who are kind of going, oh, what do I do? What exercise should I do for that? And then they see this is what you should do. So if you get people following guidelines better, that's going to give you better outcomes. For very experienced therapists as well, they may as well, with a bit of help down the line from machine learning, it might give us faster outcomes and better outcomes. So that's the first question you got to do. Then you want to know, does it improve the patient experience? And I do think we need to move away from pen and paper and showing patients, three-dimensional video exercise, two-dimensional video exercise, how you do this, timing them, prompting them with, metronome speeds and things like that. So are they getting a better experience because they're feeling they're more supported and they've got this technology that they can use that connects them to the clinic, that they know the therapist has seen what's happening, that they'll be called in if things are going pear-shaped for them at home. Is it easy to use? I mean, we're all strapped for time. We have a lot of patients coming in. So when we built Vertigenius, we were like, this has to map the clinical pathway. It has to, you know, it has to go with what the therapist is doing anyway, so that it's really quick. So I want you to be able to prescribe those exercises within 3 minutes. So we no messing around. You find the exercise, you prescribe it, you give the parameters, and you send it, and then it's gone to the patient before they're even left the clinic. That's what it had to be fast. And also being able to collect data ahead of time. So before they come in, sending them out things like, what are your problems? What are your goals? What are your symptoms at the moment? What's your DHI score? So before they even walk in the door, you open it up and you can see all that information on your screen ready to go. And the same things with physical assessment. So that was what we wanted to improve the clinician experience, improve the patient experience. And then the final thing we need to think about is cost, because if you spend money on something, you're taking it from something else. So you have to make sure that you're getting this kind of bump in. I think you've got to think about it in different ways. You don't want to lose revenue if it's your business, but you also want to get more people in at lower cost as well. And that's what in Ireland, we have a very long waiting list. So they're really looking at trying to get patients in and out and not having this revolving door. And we know that if patients after dizziness get vestibular rehabilitation, they don't fall. Within 3 months, they're much less likely to fall. So that's lower cost, is that cost of, like, in terms of preventing stuff down the line, you're helping as well in terms of delivering something at a lower cost. So that's a bit. Physiotherapists, I think we're not so really, we're more about, are we getting better outcomes? Are our patients happy with, are they getting better? That's really what we're about. The cost is probably not something we think about as much, but we do also need to address it. So they're the 4 things I think you need to ask when you're evaluating a technology for use. How's it going to affect, my practice and my care, and what are my patients going to think of it? Are they going to like it? And am I going to use it, reuse it, all that sort of stuff?
So tell us exactly, what is Vertigenius?
Yeah, so Vertigenius it's a digital health platform with a wearable sensor. So it's kind of a 3-in-1 platform. There's a clinician portal, which where you can onboard your patient, and you manage your patient from there. So it's a dashboard. You onboard the patient, and you can send out subjective questionnaires to them. You can send them out reading. You can prescribe their exercises there. You can view what's happening there. So everything, all the information and communications technology that the technology is collecting goes into this dashboard, and you manage your patient there. The patient gets an app and a head sensor. So the app is downloadable from wherever they get their apps from, and it then connects to the head sensor via Bluetooth, and it tracks the head movement in real time as they're performing any gaze stabilization exercises. So as they're moving their head, the head sensor is telling them, are they going at the right speed? Are they going in the right direction? And also we then pick up what their symptoms are before and afterwards at periods, not every exercise, because there's so many of them, but at periods during the week, we kind of pick snapshots where we go, like, how are you feeling? And then you can see that back in the dashboard. So when the patient opens up the app, they see just what they have to do, what they have to read, and then there's a little progress section where they can see, have they done what they're supposed to do today? How are they tracking in terms of their goals, and what's their overall improvement, and what's their overall symptoms? They put in their symptoms just once a day. So there are 5 symptoms of dizziness, vertigo, anxiety, imbalance, oscillopsia, nausea. And then again, they come in, and you can see how that's tracking over time as well. And then as they do their exercises, so when they press on the exercise, they see a little video, they see a visual instruction of how to do it. So they can read it, they can hear it, they can see it, and they also see how many times they have to do it and how many times they've done. So it sort of fills up as they're doing their exercises during the day. So they just keep it in the pocket, put on the head sensor, and they're doing their gaze stabilization exercises, and then all that information comes back into the therapist. So it connects you to the patient when they're not with you. Then when they come back in, you can flick open their dashboard, their individual dashboard, and you can see what they've done, how they felt, and what their progress is over time. So you can see, did they move their head at the speed you gave the speed to them? How did they feel when they were doing it? And the research that we've just published on it showed that these were MS patients using it. And what we found was that they were moving their heads at faster speeds with reduced symptoms by the end of the vestibular rehabilitation program. So the slide just here that I know you those that are listening won't be able to see it, but the first clinical study we did was really to go like, how usable is this? We really want to go, is this usable? And we did track outcomes, but it wasn't an RCT or anything like that. And we found really high usability of both clinicians and therapists, and also patients. 82% of patients improved their symptoms. We couldn't measure the physical outcomes because of COVID. I was saying it was going on during COVID. But that tracks with what we expect. These were unilateral vestibular loss patients. That tracks with what we expect. 82% of patients should improve. So we were very happy with that. And then the next study we went on to, we looked at patients with MS, and they used the head sensor. So they went home with the head sensor. And again, we used a different usability questionnaire for this study, and it tracked all these different metrics, such as like privacy, enhanced care, satisfaction, and also how confident they were in the personnel that were delivering the care. They were really confident about that. And what we found equivocal in that questionnaire was a construct called kit of substitution. So could Vertigenius substitute for your therapist? And it seemed to kind of dichotomize into, yeah, actually, this is pretty good. I could actually do this and work my way through it without a therapist, and others saying, no, we need the therapist input as well. And when you look at the science with this now, and this wasn't a randomized controlled trial, but there are a few randomized controlled trials that are showing that the therapist may not necessarily be needed for outcomes, but qualitatively and in terms of the experience of the patient, it is important for the therapist to be there. So we're not redundant yet.
Redundancy is, we don't want to be redundant. That would be bad. But I will say,
we're definitely not going to be redundant.
No, there's too much individualization, and there's so much variability to patient. What I really like, having tried remote therapy monitoring here with patients before, I like that you have the sensor that links up with the app and then measures data, gives that patient almost like that gamified sense of satisfaction of filling up the exercises on the app. It kind of brings them back to it. And it was just kind of like an outpatient orthopedic remote therapy monitoring. The patient would log into the app, but they did that for like the first week, and then they got an idea of what their exercises were like, and they would just do them without going into the app, and then you couldn't track them. This seems like a really easy way to get consistent data, to consistently track the patient and know that they're doing it correctly. Like right now, I can send a patient home with a home exercise program, and I'm not sure if they're going to do it right over the next week until I see him again. When they come back into the clinic to see me and I have them perform, I say, all right, show me what you've been doing at home. Let's go through your home exercise program. And everything is wrong. That's when you start to panic. You're like, oh my gosh, they've been doing this incorrectly for the last week. And what have they done? This is why they're feeling worse and why we're not maybe, progressing as much. Having something like this option to have patients participate with while going through active therapy is something that's actually very interesting to me as a clinician, because I can imagine I'd probably get them much better, much faster, and get better results with them because of that.
Yeah, I mean, we're not clear on that yet, and that's obviously the better outcomes piece that we all want to get. But I'm pretty confident that when we start learning more about dosage and adherence together, that we will be able to answer those questions, and we will get patients better faster. But I don't think we're there yet, because we don't have the data. We haven't been able to measure it as of yet. But there is some really exciting work going on around the world using sensors and looking at the signal from the head. I mean, what patients are doing, how their heads are moving differently. So we've a lot to learn from a sensor being on the head. We've done a lot with force plates at the feet, right? But we haven't really had sensors, attached to the head to see what they're doing. So I think that's the exciting bit for me, that we're going to start understanding that a little bit more. And to your point that, yeah, so if they've got an app, they could just sit with the app and just press the exercise, and it looks like they've done it when they haven't done it at all. Whereas the head sensor tracks the head. So you're absolutely convinced and know that they've done it, unless they've given it to somebody else to do the exercise for them. It's been, that they have done that exercise, and you can see what they're experiencing afterwards. So it's really nice, because what you see with the patient is, have you push them up into that, I sometimes use 5 out of 10 as the kind of cutoff. I don't want you going up above 5 out of 10. I don't have actually a slide for this, but we will see how they felt before the exercise and afterwards. So if they go from a 2 to a 9, when they're moving their head at, at 120 beats per minute, then I know either I've got to reduce the duration or I've got to reduce the speed. And that's the really nice information we saw in the study, was we found the speed going up and the symptoms going down. Whereas the symptoms started high at low speeds, we were then getting higher speeds with lower symptoms at the very end, which is really, really interesting. And we know that in children's life, that's what we've been doing, but we've never actually been able to see that in the home before. So that was really exciting. So what you can just see there is what that's just a typical patient. The very little dark bar there, if you hover over that in the portal, you'll see how many exercises you prescribed. And that magic kind of, and we can't do it in vestibular, but it's around 2 or 3 exercises apparently you should only give, or they don't do them all. We always, we often start with 4 stabilization exercises. So you're already missing that target. And then a few balance exercises, a few gait exercises. So that just shows you how many actually you've prescribed for the patient. And then you see the bar of say you give them a 2-week program, you see a gray bar of how many they need to do. And then as they're doing them, that light blue bar, the bar fills up. So when they come back in, you can see this patient probably did about, not even 50% of the exercises they were supposed to do. We also track the minutes because of that 50-hour cutoff for reducing fall risk in our elders. So I often say to them, right, we need to get you to 50 hours over the next 2 to 3 months, and that will reduce your fall risk. So we look at that. And then what we can also see is their symptoms over time. So they put their symptoms in once a day, and we track that over time. So you can see somebody had a vestibular migraine in the middle of a week because their symptoms just spike up. Certain symptoms spike up. Anxiety has been a real eye opener to track, actually, how it really tracks with vertigo. So you can see the vertigo goes up, the anxiety goes up, and vice versa. So it's been really interesting to watch that as well. And again, that's something that we don't have great knowledge on just yet. We know about anxiety and how it's associated, but how they track together. So that just show you that slide that you just put up there. That's just, again, a typical patient. You can see they're just kind of hovering around high up, and then all of a sudden they take this dip and they start to improve towards the end there. So they're scoring around a 2 or 3 out of 10, and probably, getting ready for discharge at that point.
Now, one of the things when I was learning vestibular therapy that was drilled into my head, which I've since somewhat gone away from depending on the patient, but if you're tracking symptoms 1 time a day, you're not necessarily tracking symptoms pre and post exercise to know how that specific exercise challenged or impacted the patient. Do you find when it comes to individualizing care and progressing, regressing, and understand the dosage for that specific exercise, that is an important piece to have? Are you missing that piece of information, or is it okay to just check once a day? Go ahead.
So we do both. So for all the symptoms, we check once a day. For the gait stabilization exercise, at the second session, every second day, we track before and afterwards. So you get a snap. We just didn't think a patient was going to be putting in symptoms before and after every gait stabilization exercise, 4 times a day, 4 exercises, 16 times, not a chance were they going to be doing that. And actually the feedback we're getting from patients is that even that second session every second day might be a bit much. They don't mind the once a day. So I think, and again, it all boils down to you explain what the reason is you're doing this, how it's informing how you're progressing them. That you're saying, I need this information because it informs how I progress you, and that informs how you get better. So just please put it in so that I can see. So we do both. We check once a day, and then we check periodically during the week how they are before and after an exercise. And it's really interesting point you raised there, because patients, at first we were just doing the once a day, and that's exactly what patients said to us. This isn't, I'm fine when I do this. When I open up the app, I'm fine. So it's when I do the exercises that I'm feeling that it's making me feel bad. So then we built in the before and after, but not at every exercise session. And what I'd really like to do with balance exercises is to be able to track how much they feel they're swaying before and afterwards, because as we know, they get really good at balance exercises much faster maybe than with the gait stabilization exercises. So it would just be able to be really nice to be able to say, right, you were doing feet apart, eyes closed on foam, but you're just so steady doing that now. You're feeling steady doing. We need to get your feet together. And you're waiting for a week or 2 before they come back, and you're going, now put your feet together. unless you're told, obviously there's ways around that you can tell them to do it when they're ready. But if you were tracking that as well, you'd be able to progress them a lot faster and remotely without them having to come into you.
Sure. I think there's such a balance because in some patients, they're already hypervigilant to every little thing that they're feeling. So you don't necessarily want to draw more attention to how they're feeling, but you also need that feedback to know, okay, is this too much? Is this too little, too fast, too slow, etc. So I must have misunderstood the 1 time a day versus you are checking after some exercise.
Yeah, we're doing both. Yeah, we're doing both if they're using the head sensor. So we're doing both for the gaze stabilization exercises, and then we're going to get an overall composite picture of you just once a day, and that's what you're seeing there on that slide. You can see that just going down over time. So they, as they do start to feel better, that the once a day picture does change. We saw that in all the studies that we did, and then the symptom one as well in the second study where we used the head sensor, we saw the symptoms going down and the head speed going up. And that was where they were tracked, sort of every second day, the second session of the exercises.
Yeah. My other question is let's say you're evaluating a patient and you're going to use this technology with the patient. Is every patient getting the same sort of set of exercises, or how is it individualized from the get-go of care?
So it's done, as I said, it maps the clinical pathway. So you can choose from about 250 exercises, and you choose the parameters. So you choose the surface, you choose the eyes open, eyes closed, you choose the time, you choose the background. So we've got backgrounds, optokinetic backgrounds in there that will change with the gaze stabilization exercises. And then once you've chosen all those parameters, then you send, and you can, again, at the click of a button, change that. So if you want to change from feet apart to feet together, you do that. So it's all, as is the best practice, completely individualized to the patient, but decided on by the clinician.
Are there any instances where this would not be appropriate for a certain type of patient? Are there people that are excluded from utilizing this technology?
Yeah, I think with all technologies there, and it's not happening as much, I think, because we all got so familiar with technology during COVID. Very older, cognitively impaired patients may need a carer to do it with them, right? So something like that. I think to your point, Abbie, about the hypervigilant patients, where you maybe don't want them putting a lot of attention on their symptoms, you might want to be cautious with them. At the moment, I don't use it with BPV patients that are just one and dones, because if they're just in, out, don't have the subjective dizziness at the end, don't have any balance issues when they come back in, they're not going to need it. We're probably over time going to build in some self-CRMs in there, and also just a kind of a, information technology on what to expect after the maneuver, because we know unless you really tell them, you may feel off, you may feel a bit different for 24 hours, you get these angry phone calls, you've made me worse, when in fact they're not spinning anymore when they lie down. So those sort of things, I think we can we will tailor to BPPV down the line. And also probably build in some education to therapists, like when they, what's that Kim maneuver again? What's the timings on that? How do we do that? That there might be just a little bit of a cheat thing there for the therapist to take a look at it if they haven't used a maneuver in a while, or they haven't seen an APO horizontal, canal in a while. What do I do with this one again? So those sort of things we'll put in, but at the moment that's not in there. So I would say, in our clinic we use it probably about 70% of patients that come in. They're eligible for it and they'll try it. And if they just aren't open to technology, and it's very few these days, the odd one will say, oh, just could I have pen and paper. So we actually built in, even though it's a technology, we built in a facility where you can just print out the exercises and hand them to the patient as well. And they get a little picture and they get the description and they get all the parameters as well, but they have to read it rather than hear it and see it and be guided through it. But that's there. And that's for the electronic patient record as well. You just save the exercises to the electronic patient record and you don't have to, your notes are done.
Very cool stuff. Now you're using this in Ireland. You were mentioning before our call about some implications in the United States. You want to bring us up to speed on that?
Yeah, so we are CE marked in Europe and on the market there here in Europe basically, and the head sensors we're just waiting for. We're just finalizing the manufacturing pathway for them at the moment, and we're hoping that they're going to be ready, Q1 next year. And we've just been listed with the FDA, so we are can be on the market in the US. We have a few wrinkles to iron out. We want to just check everything's going to work in the States, and then we will be on the market hopefully in the States by end of Q1 next year.
Well, I'm excited about this technology, and I know that our listeners, because we do get a good mix of both clinicians and patients, will be very excited to learn about this and hear about it and look for it once it does hit the market. Where could everybody find more information? Where can they look, figure out more about Vertigenius and your work that you've done?
Yeah, so there's we can put in the show notes the two. I mean, I think the most important thing is the evidence that we've collected, and it was built. It's been built by vestibular experts for vestibular experts, and also actually for people who are learning how to do this treatment as well. I think it's going to help guide them in terms of giving exercise as well. There's a website, www.vertigenius.com as well, which kind of explains the technology. And if anybody wants to talk to talk to the team about having this technology in their clinic, feel free to reach out to us. We'll certainly be delighted to do a demo for you. I'm very happy to talk to anybody about it as well.
Dr. Meldrum, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm also, as with Danny, super excited for this technology and so appreciative of all the work that you've put into this. Thank you for coming on and sharing it with us.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
This podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition.
The content of this podcast is based on general knowledge and information available up until the recording of this specific episode. Medical knowledge and practices may evolve over time, and new information may emerge that could change the understanding or treatment of vestibular dysfunction. It is important to consult a qualified healthcare professional for the most up-to-date and personalized advice.
The information provided in this podcast is meant to complement, not replace, the relationship that exists between a patient and their healthcare provider. It is intended to empower patients with knowledge about vestibular dysfunction and its management, but individual cases may vary, and treatment approaches should be tailored to each patient's unique circumstances.
By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge and agree to the terms of this medical disclaimer. The organizers, presenters, and creators of this podcast are not liable for any actions or decisions taken by individuals based on the information presented herein. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider for medical advice and treatment.